Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for the Women Leading Innovation Stories from STEM Trailblazers discussion. I am Deleen Powell. I am VP of Marketing and Events with the Jamaica Technology and Digital Alliance, and I'm joined by two amazing women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We're here to have a frank discussion about what their experiences have been within this field that many would consider to be male dominated. In fact, the statistics back this up. So, the International Telecommunications Union, which is that arm of the United Nations that deals with the mainstreaming of information and communication technology, they have declared that while we have about 40% of women that are in leadership roles in many different industries, many different sectors, we find that those numbers are much lower when it comes to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And this has been for a variety of reasons. Some persons have said interest, some have said exposure. Many have said, women do not believe that they have a place in this field or in these fields. But of course, as these ladies will tell you, there certainly is a place for women at, in these fields. And of course, we deserve to have seats at the table. So we're very honored to have each of them join us today. Unfortunately, Ingrid Riley, who should also have joined us, she had an unforeseen emergency and she will not be able to join us this evening. But of course, you know that Ingrid sends her love and she's here supporting these ladies as they are about to embark on this journey with us so that we can really explore their experiences and inspire others. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is to have each of these ladies tell us a bit about themselves. So, the beautiful thing about their experiences is that they are both involved in the empowerment of individuals, particularly within the realm of ICT, but each go about it in a slightly different way. I want to start with Melisa. Talk to us about Nobellum.
Hi, thank you. A lot of the things you said really hit home, especially when it comes to, not seeing yourself represented and therefore not being a part of the industry. And that speaks to my story a lot. My background, I'm a software developer. I build apps from web apps, mobile apps. And after building about 18 or so, I started taking on more leadership roles within companies that were doing a lot of digital transformation projects across North America. And I'd work on pretty big projects, and I'm the only Black person. And I was like, wow, we're seeing a massive shift in how money is being traded, how people are interacting with themselves, and our community are not on the playing field. And so after complaining about it for a while, I decided to launch a mandate to support the startup of 100 Black owned businesses in STEM by 2025. And we hit the floor running, got a fund with the University of Toronto, and they essentially match our fundraising dollar for dollar. And this can go into the millions. Um, and being in this industry, we run an accelerator, which provides access to funding, training and resources for entrepreneurs, massive facilities if you're in STEM. We've actually have a couple startups in Jamaica who are using our facilities here in Canada and our partners in Jamaica. And so we're really looking at ways at Nobellum to increase access for Black founders in STEM. And of course, when you add the intersectionality of being a woman, definitely lots of work still left to do there, but hoping the work with the JTDA will really increase that access.
Thank you so much. I think that's an amazing goal, 100 by 2025.
Yes,
How has it been coming along so far?
yeah, we are close to about 60 companies. We are doing quite a interesting work. Actually, next month we're going to LinkedIn to host an event called Women Investing in Women as they navigate their careers in STEM. And the goal there is to connect about 40 aspiring women with 10 accomplished women in that industry. And so that will be another 50. So I think we'll be well past 100 by the end of next year.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Melissa. And of course, Godiva and I, we go way back. We actually were part of a program that was hosted by the US Embassy that dealt with young leaders of the Americas. And at that time, I was introduced to Godiva and her very ambitious uh, her mandate, which is really to ensure that ICT is accessible to every boy and girl right across the country. And she finds such innovative ways to do so. Godiva, talk to us about Steam House.
All right, wonderful. I really just wanted to echo Melissa's sentiments earlier about the statistics you mentioned with ITU. Uh, there's so many reasons, right, that have been researched as to why women leave tech, leave engineering at higher rates than their counterparts. And a lot of times, even once you've done the degree, you're already working in the field, it sometimes comes down to a sense of belonging. You know, you don't often feel like there has been a space that has been created and crafted for you that allows you to exist as you are. And that is something that is very true about the Black experience. And it's also very true as simply as a woman. Now, my journey with Steam House goes way, way, way back. Because Steam House didn't just come out of thin air. It started really, um, it seeded as an idea while I was studying electronics engineering at the University of the West Indies. And it was a particular time in my life, right? Because you would leave high school. At the time, I was hell bent that I'm going to go to university and I'm going to go into renewable energy because nothing meant more to me than, all right, working with solar, working with PV, working with wind, because this was going to be the future. And so coming into university, that was my first goal. And quite quickly, I started to realize just how much not only didn't high school prepare us for university, but also as you try to find your place in what was at the time a classroom of 40 students, 9 of us were girls. 9.
Mm.
And
Wow.
and I'll be so honest with you, by the time it was a 3-year program, it was the first time it was being introduced at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. And this was a time when only St. Augustine really had engineering programs. So you'd have to go all the way to Trinidad. First time this happening really in Jamaica. And I want to tell you, interestingly enough, I have the most non-linear path in technology ever. I started off in a class of 40, 9 girls in the class of 40, and three, 3 or 4 of us graduated from that cohort. I want to tell you, I was not in that 3. I was not in that 3.
Interesting.
And that's where, you start to see different pathways. Despite not being in that 3, I found myself in a different sort of skill set while at university. And that was as it related to managing technical programs, because I was the chair for the Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers. And with that, we would have basically coached robotics teams, software teams, engineering ethics teams that would go to the US every year to compete with University of Georgia, University of South Florida, all of these universities from the Southeast US and the Caribbean in our competition, on our student competition. And it was really there that I started to, again, understand something is happening here. Something is happening here why I'm not seeing a lot of women. Something is happening here why I was seeing classmates like myself or persons who would have been my batchmates who are just as talented, who simply did not have the same level of opportunity. And so having taken that experience, I really came back and, I started with the club, really with the club, working with Ministry of Education, working with schools, because it was also a time where the Ministry of Education was trying to figure out, how do we get more science labs? How do we get more students to study sciences because we were having a science teacher shortage and the equipment was short too. So I put all of that in the context of there's something bigger happening when the mission of STEAM House has really been to craft what is a 21st century learning model. And for us, it means that we are helping students to understand the future of work. Even before everybody was talking about AI and blockchain and this thing, we were talking about it in 2018. But unfortunately, nobody really understood what it meant. But then here we go. We have a whole pandemic. Everyone has to be inside from 2020 to 2022. And everything became digital. Like what we had known to be true about how the world was moving and the need, or rather, for people like us that look like us to not just be on the fringes of technology, but right in the middle, it became more apparent. So over the past 4 years since Steam House has been around, we've actually hit our goal, our first initial goal. We had a 10-year goal basically of reaching 5,000 students. We hit that in 3 years. And that was crazy. And so it puts us in a position where we can ask now that we've reached these many students, what more can we do? And as you can tell, technology is ever evolving, but I think we go back to that core of how do we create belonging, especially in an age where technology is not just something that is on the fringes. It is something that is happening every day, that even if you don't want to be a part of it, you're going to be doing online banking. You don't necessarily have to learn to code. That's really important because I'm a non-technical technical person. But being able to problem solve, being able to understand what goes into these technologies are going to be core skills for children or just the next generation growing up in this world. And it's really with that that our work has focused at the primary level, and now we're moving right up to high school. And throughout that, the mention of the program that we did through YLI, that was Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative, we actually were able in 2021 to host Jamaica's first AI hackathon for students of all ages. So we're talking about students as young as 10 learning what machine learning is, training a model, all of these things that we're getting up today and talking about LMM. Yeah, students were training models on climate change, training models that were like song classifiers, all because there was an early interest in making sure that we created again a sense of belonging and a sense of being in the future without, having to wait until technology catches up or us in the Caribbean catch up to where technology is. So that's
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, that experience seems like it would have been very fulfilling. One of the things that I think many persons don't realize is not every young person, whether it's a young boy or young girl, is actually exposed to science or science education while they are, whether in primary or secondary school. There are many persons who, in having conversations with them now and being able to speak about doing labs in a chemistry lab, doing different labs in a biology lab, then having a separate physics lab while I was in secondary school. And they looked at me and their mouths were on the floor because it just was not their experience. And so that exposure to this kind of education at a young age can sort of spark or ignite that interest. And hopefully, by seeing that for both our boys, but definitely our young ladies, we can see more of them coming into this space. It's an amazing story that you've shared. And I'm sure, Melisa, you also have experiences where you would have had a sort of life-changing or had a pivotal moment in your career. Can you talk to us about one of those experiences?
Yeah, I've had a number of those experiences. So I'm currently based in Canada. I was born in Jamaica, but I left at a young age. Um, and growing up, to be honest with you, I had a huge phobia of math. Like I would not touch math with a 9-inch pole. And I remember even in high school, I hated math so bad that I opted to take French in the last year instead of math. and they let me do it, because I just would like get totally, feel like I can't do it, and then it's too hard. And then when I got into I went to university actually, and when I went to university, it's ironic, I did not study anything to do with tech. I was a history student. I specialized in African studies, and then I had a minor in law. And so my projection was to go to law school. But then when I started working at a law firm interning, I absolutely hated it. The hours were ridiculous and the people were so miserable. And I was like, I am not staying here. So I decided to just get a job and start working. I got into project management. And in project management, I discovered I had these really good skills. Like I could, you know, really look at the logic of the situation, figure it all out. And I remember I started managing a tech team. And these guys, we were managing about, I think it was like a $300 million project. Shoppers Drug Mart was being acquired by Loblaws, and they had to change out all their tech to what the parent company wanted. And so I was responsible for that project. And on that project, I learned so many technical things. And I think what really stood out to me was it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. I thought you had to be like a rocket science to figure this out. And then what I noticed was I was the project manager and I was responsible for the tech team that was doing all these changes, but they weren't coming when they wanted, going when they wanted. Meanwhile, I'm locked in the office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and it's summertime outside. And I was like, oh, hell no. Nah. So I quit my project management job and I went back to school for software development and network engineering. And I decided from that day forward that I was going to live my life based on the problems I wanted to solve and the lifestyle I wanted to have, as opposed to picking a job based on what I thought I was good at. And I realized the lifestyle of people in tech is what I really wanted. I wanted that freedom, but I also wanted the freedom of creativity. I feel like oftentimes people think that the creative industry is so different from tech, but it's really not, because here you can create anything. It's literally, and the other lady, Godiva, I believe your name is, you made a really good point about the kinds of skill sets you're going to need to cope and adapt to the future economy is going to be extremely different than what you need today. And a lot of those skills are creative thinking, problem solving. And ironically, for anybody on this call who's making the switch into tech, what really helped me to go from being a history student to a software developer is studying for the LSATs. The LSAT has a lot of logic built into it. If this happened, then that, while this is happening, if this precedent is set. So they made us do a lot of logic games in my prep to go to law school. And that actually really helped me with Java. Like I was able to apply that same exact logic to Java. So for anyone here who's intimidated by tech, wants to get in, but doesn't really know that middle ground, I would really say take some LSAT prep courses, do the games, the logic games, because if you can figure out, and sometimes, one of the things I also feel like was a huge turning point, when I realized, when I had this whole perspective shift on tech, I realized that some of the best developers aren't even the ones that are in the back end coding. They're the ones that are strategizing and building infrastructure. And so when I got into tech, I knew that algorithms and C and database and all of that part of tech was not for me. And I realized there was a huge spectrum of what you could do in tech. And that was a huge turning point, seeing that it's not just programmers, but you have people who are building the front end, people who are doing the design, the UI, UX, people who are, designing the API structures, people who are doing CRM integrations, you I know so many people who don't know how to program, but they're doing ERP and CRM integrations. So I think that that was a huge turning point, seeing tech as a multifaceted arena, seeing that I didn't need to be a mathematician to get into this space, and seeing the lifestyle that came with it and the flexibility to create what I want to create. Now I coach founders. This year, In the last year, I've coached over 150 startup founders that are building tech apps, and I'm helping them to create and design. So, what they're building, right? And so it really is a different way, I think, of looking at it. And that was for me probably one of the most pivotal points in my career.
I want to throw in just a hook on that.
Definitely.
That was absolutely amazing. Because we work a lot with young people, and the common misconception is that you have to be a techie. You have to you have to like math. But as you rightly pointed out, Melissa, there are so many ways that you can be a part of technology that sometimes it would seem as if it has nothing to do with technology. and and I kind of want to just throw in the idea of verticals, right? Technology is really just a vehicle, and that vehicle, if you want to go to St. Thomas, if you want to go to St. James, if you want to go to St. Elizabeth, it will take you there. And so you don't have to get really boxed into, you know, is it St. Thomas? Is it St. Elizabeth? What you really want to focus is building on the skill set. And I give you the example of NVIDIA, right? Not quite a local example, but super salient to just demonstrate this point. Now, one of our mentors that has worked with us and judges over the years is a bioinformatist. I can't pronounce it right, but basically bioinformation. And one of the core skills that he would have done is basically just biotech mapping, right? But then he started to work at NVIDIA. So you might be thinking, what does NVIDIA, which is doing GPUs, or they would have been doing video games before, that is really where it was focused. What is the interconnection with someone who was studying biology, handling data, but now they're working at somewhere like NVIDIA that is now building hardware for artificial intelligence? And the connection is as simple as this: there is a converging point when it comes to tech. There's something that everybody has to use, and understanding how those skill sets are transferable is super
Yeah.
important. You mentioned law earlier. I also want to point out something like political science. Political science prepares you a lot to work in data science. And sometimes we make it very confusing as if this is something that only some people can do. That is not true. Everybody, regardless of your interest, skill set, or even attention span, I'm going to throw that one out there. There's something that is in it for you, but it may just come down to honing, like, what is that area? Maybe you like art, you know, look at a studio that's doing animation, that's basically mapping out people to see what does it look like when the driver's like super animated. you know, People are basically building technology that can enhance the human experience. So if what you
Thanks for
you can always lean into tech.
Thanks for that, Godiva. I really love the analogy you used of tech being a vehicle. And I think one of the things that we often forget is the heart of it is not the coding, the heart of it is problem solving. It's about looking at society, looking at what is needed, looking at a problem or looking at something that's being done well, but it can be done better, and seeing how tech can help to bridge that gap, or help to make that process a little more efficient. And I love the fact that both of you would have been able to share experiences of being in leadership roles. For instance, Melissa having that role of actually tutoring or mentoring business leaders. What was that like for you as a woman? No, I must admit that whenever I get this kind of question, like, oh, do I think it has been a little more difficult for you as a woman? I'm often left to ask the person as opposed to what my only experience has been as a woman. But do you find that you've encountered any challenges specifically because of your gender? Or do you think when you walk into a room, you're able to command the same type of respect that would be given to a man?
Oh, it's a really layered question. And it depends. So I feel like it's almost a double-edged sword because I feel like a lot of respect from the startup community here that's developing in Ontario because it's so new. And I don't know if the audience is aware, but over the last 3 years, we've seen the emergence of about 5 to 6 different Black innovation hubs because the government injected over $460 million into the Canadian economy to fund the development of Black innovation. And so you're seeing all these accelerator hubs pop up. And out of the 6, only 1 is female led, and that's ours. And out of the 6, only 1 is actually grassroots community led. The rest are all institutional led, meaning you've got the University of Toronto, you've got Waterloo, you've got Queen's, you've got all these huge Canadian institutions, Ryerson, York, that are developing Black focused programming and building out these hubs because the government is providing the funding. And so what my experience has been is I feel like because of the roles that the institutions have played, I see there's a theme in the hiring, right? And it's all men. And the one that's grassroots is women led, interestingly enough. And so we came out as a group of like 4 to 6 people who all own our own businesses and decided to lead this mandate. And the experience that I've had is that there's working in this space, I see that it's familiar to men to want to do things with other men because they can talk about other things. And there's a cultural experience that almost happens where like I don't know anything going on in basketball and I'm not doing the things that they're doing. And so I find it's the conversations that happen on the golf course, right? That you get excluded from. And now, you're invited to the panel at the last minute because they realize they have no women. And this has been a theme that I've seen, even one time I was on the panel at an event at Mars Discovery District over here in Canada. They're one of the biggest funded innovation districts. And the guy that I was on a panel with was just talking about the $4 billion that their organization raised to invest in startups. And at the end of it, he was like, I heard such great things about your organization. I'd love to connect further. We've got this funding opportunity coming up. So like, who else do you work to? Like, who do you report to? And I was like, well, I don't report to anyone. I am the CEO. He's like, yeah, but like, who's your boss? Like, which of these institutions, do you work with? And I was like, we are grassroots. I'm the founder and CEO. And he was like, oh, okay. And then kind of all the conversations around partnerships and funding kind of just dwindled. And I was like, wow, that really goes to show that he did not look at me and think that I would have been the founder and CEO. And so some of these experiences happen. But on the positive side, all my founders have been amazing. Like, I feel like they're my little chickens in a way. Like they are so like gung-ho. You have the 1 or 2 that have attitude problems. There's always going to be those people. But I would say like 98% of the founders that I've worked with are just so receptive and coachable and willing to learn. Really just changed my perspective because of course at first when I first started I used to keep a huge distance. Like I wouldn't communicate with them on WhatsApp. I would keep a huge distance. But then after time, when I saw how eager they were for the knowledge and the experience, we formed the WhatsApp group for a cohort, and I found that the respect has been consistent. In fact, it almost feels like, because I am younger than a lot of the men that I'm coaching, I'm almost like their little sister. And even the senior advisors and the team, it is really interesting. Chantal, you asked, it is an interesting question to ask because as someone who's in her early 30s, most of my team and senior advisors are at least like 10 years older than me. And so not only am I leading startups, but the team that I'm leading are almost all older than me. So it's a very interesting position to be in, but I am grateful that there has been, I feel like, a lot of community interest in economic development, and that supersedes a lot of the foolishness that we used to have to deal with. I feel like the community is more willing to work together than I've seen in my mom's generation.
I like that the collaboration and that collaborative spirit, because you often hear that it's difficult for women to work together because they may end up competing with each other. And I really find that that's an adage. You know, I don't find that that happens as much
No.
today. And I think especially for women who are focused on national development, you're looking at empowering other persons. uh, those types of women are typically open to partnership, open to sharing information, open to really working together, because at the end of the day, the focus is the greater good. But you do find, especially when it comes to being sometimes the only woman in the room, you walk into the meeting and it's assumed that you're the one that will be taking the notes, you know?
Girl.
You know, and then you'll hear things like, oh, you know, because you're a lady, so you must have excellent penmanship. And it's like, you
It's like
could write
when I
make
tell my little sister, like,
too.
you're so good at washing the dishes, like you're amazing at washing, then they want to do it all the time. It's like, no, telling us that we're good at it is not gonna make us want to do it.
No, it's not. And it's interesting because I came across an article some time ago that indicated that the 8-hour work week was not necessarily designed for both genders, because at the time when it was introduced, it was the men that were going out to work. And in most cases, they would have been married and had someone in the home, or the 8-hour work day, my apologies. So that's the 40-hour work week. So they would have had someone in the home that would have been taking care of the chores, doing all of those kinds of things. So they were able to work a full 8 or 10 hours, go home and not have to worry about those kinds of household things.
Yeah.
And you find that for many women, it really is a balancing act, because you have to show up 100% of the time at work. And then you also have your personal or your home obligations. How are you able to balance all of that? Let's start with you, Godiva.
Oh my. So this is a complicated question for me because, like Melissa, I'm in my early 30s, and and so I'm grateful to an extent that the responsibilities that I have aren't as extensive as a young family, because I genuinely respect. I have colleagues who are, wives, mothers. All I am is big sis, and trust me, even being big sis, it takes a lot out of you to be there for the people that you care about. Um, and in order to be there, you can't be pouring from an empty cup. So it always is a function of what do you value? What do you value? Like anything you're going to do, like what do I genuinely care about? And it becomes for me a question of prioritizing the things that I care about, the people I care about, understanding that what is going to be more enduring than my work is the relationships that I build, how I show up for the people that I care about. And to some extent, it sounds cliche, I admit. The memories that I'm going to really create with the people that I know one day very well might not be here. And it's not easy. I work very hard. My friends complain all the time. I'm a known flaker, or I think at one point I just stopped getting invitations to go out because I think my friends had basically figured out, yeah, I'm going to invite her, but she's not coming. And so as I go into my later 30s, it has really been a conscious decision of how am I going to prioritize my time, and how am I going to reflect those values of like friendship while also maintaining the standard of work. And you mentioned earlier the simple fact that, quite frankly, when it comes to a woman, they weren't thinking about us when they created the 8-hour workday. And I'll extend that to say, in so many ways, women were never considered. Like one thing that I came across quite recently was the fact that basically the female anatomy was mapped in like 2005, way after they did the human genome. So even when you think about drugs that are created, they weren't even created with you in mind. Half of the time, drugs that are being created have been tested on men. There's one really prominent Caribbean, Bayesian to be specific, scientists, biologists, who did some quite groundbreaking research when it came to women and breast cancer. And before her, there was not that focus on how do we accommodate women in work? How do we accommodate women in life? And I'm careful to call it an accommodation because, quite frankly, cliche again, without a woman, we wouldn't be here. I'm sure in a couple of decades, we're going to figure out how to do everything without bodies. But for now, it matters that we balance, again, the very human side of us to be able to thrive. And how I do that is constantly asking myself, like, who are the things that I care? Who are the people I care about? And what are the things I care about? And how do I strive to put those first? It doesn't always happen. It is not easy to do. You will get tired, but the intention matters. And I'll push this further to say, and I know there are men tuning in. I think it's important that when we talk about having a woman fully show up in whatever role, that in the same way that I wouldn't want to say we're sometimes forced to work two jobs at home and at work. I think it's sort of incumbent on the environments that are going to facilitate us to not create this sense of I'm guilty because I have to do all of these things. You know, there's a sense of guilt that you get. There's a sense of guilt that you get from being home too much with your family, being at work too much, so you're missing your family, or even your friends. But I think work environments have the sort of responsibility to make those things okay. Because, again, as much as we like money, and as much as economies are driven by revenue, nothing can outcost human value. There's a value on the person. So I'm going to throw in this last statistic to say, there was a study done, I think it was UN Women who did this study, that basically pointed to when you take care of women, chances are your revenue as a company is in the 300% and over. So even from a perspective of looking at your bottom line, there is room to have these discussions. And if you are a man in senior leadership, talk to the women who are in your organization. Find out, like, how can I help you to do more so you can be more, and also in the end we will all benefit, because it's not a tit for tat. It's mutual benefit for mutual collaboration. And I think that's how we really get to push the needle, collaborating, from sharing duties, sharing experiences and empathizing with those experiences, to doing the action, because it's easy to talk. But men, I'm imploring you, do the action. Talk to the women in your organization. Give them more time off when they have children.
Boy, I tell you, so what you're speaking about is allyship. Definitely, we need to ensure that men, there are different ways that they can be allies within the workplace, within society generally, just to ensure that we as women also have a seat at the table. One of the interesting points that you made that had to do with medical research, particularly as it relates to breast cancer, but we know that generally, if it's men that are leading a lot of the research, in many cases, they're going to be focused on the things that affect them. And so when it comes to medicine, when it comes to tech, when it comes to engineering, mathematics, all of these different areas, when women have a seat at the table, then we're better able to see the mainstreaming of a lot of the issues, the concerns that would affect women. And let's face it, there are men and there are also women. So we make up pretty much half of the population. So, our needs, our concerns are also valid, also important, should also be taken into consideration. And of course, each of your journeys exemplifies that. Before I get into the next part of this conversation, I'm just going to do the shameless plug. So if you're not already following us on the social media platforms, please ensure that you look for us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We are the JTDA. Of course, you also have an opportunity to continuously support the work of the JTDA by contributing to the Tech Alliance Fund. There's a link that will be dropped in the chat, and you can also have access to that on our website, which is jtda.org. And if you're enjoying this conversation, there are many more like it that will be taking place next week at our Women of Impact celebration. That takes place on Thursday at the Courtly Garden Terrace, and it starts at 6 p.m. So we're hoping that some of you that would have joined us virtually, you'll be able to join us in person for that very special event. So now that the advertisements are out of the way, I really want to get into, underrepresentation. So yes, as women, you're women in tech, but you're also a woman of color. How are some of the ways that you have been able to advocate for other women of color within your industry and help them to see themselves within that space? I'll start with you, Melisa.
All right. Couple of ways. So we run our accelerator program that supports founders that are building startups. We're launching two more initiatives to really double down on that impact. One is an investment fund, and the other is a career accelerator. So with the career accelerator, we provide like upskilling and training through our number of partners. So whether it's prompt engineering, software development, etc. And then we have through our corporate partners, we have internships. So a couple of the big banks that are looking for providing that support. They provide internships as well as the universities and stuff like that. We are also launching a fund. The purpose of this fund, it's a venture capital fund. It's about 25 million, and we've got about 6 million committed so far. And the purpose of the fund is to increase access to Black founders, whether you're a woman or not a woman. And a couple of things we're doing in preparation for that is we are currently connecting 3 women to angel investors, running something sort of a syndicate. We partnered up with the Firehood. They're an angel investment firm. I think they're building the Phoenix Fund. It's about $100 million. And the goal with this syndicate is we're looking at bringing in 3 different angels that cut checks anywhere between 150 to 300,000 to connect with 3 women founders who are also looking for some funds. Some startup, they don't accept check. They're mainly looking to raise higher checks. So what we would do is like put the money together. So let's say one angel has 10, another angel has 30, another angel has 15. We would support them with facilitating that. So we're doing that specifically for women between now and June, and we'll be making the announcements on June 15 during our Biz Summit, which Alexia will be speaking at. I'm not sure if it's going to be virtual or in person, but Alexia from your organization is going to be speaking there. And the goal with that event is to increase representation. It's called Black Innovation in STEM Summit, the Biz Summit. And the goal of that summit, we're bringing together a number of different stakeholders in the industry, but really increasing access for Black founders. So we're doing that right before Collision on June 15th. So we've teamed up with Collision. Last year, we offered 400 free tickets to Collision through our partnership at the Black Innovation Zone, and we'll be doing that again this year. One of our biggest hurdles we've observed, especially here in North America, is when you have these massive conferences and you go in there, you are literally like 1 out of 20,000. And so we were not seeing enough representation. Hell, people didn't even know these things were happening. So we really had to get the Black community represented, and we worked with the city of Brampton and a number of key stakeholders um, across the ecosystem: Black Founders Network, Black Entrepreneurship Alliance, Federation of Black Canadians, FACE, and we pooled together almost $100,000 to get those tickets. And now we're doing something, we're digging a little deeper this year. This year we are looking at, instead of 400, if we're lucky, we'll get to 1,000 sponsored tickets to increase Black presence at Collision. And we're working with a number of different stakeholders to do that, as well as increasing startup visas. So we're seeing a lot of a lot of people coming to Canada on startup visas are not from our community. So I've been working with key stakeholders that are on the other side to see how can we increase that access. And it's not because I want to take Black people out of their countries and bring them here, but I think the knowledge transfer is important. Come here, learn, go back and build connections here. I think the people in Africa and the Caribbean, we need access to the North American markets. And so if you are looking for access to the Canadian marketplace here, and you're interested in doing business, feel free to connect with us, because I think that one of the things we're being very instrumental about is building bridges and almost being a trampoline for those that come here, as well as a soft landing, right? If you're trying to transition from Jamaica to Canada and start your business, if you do not land into an accelerator or an ecosystem, you will struggle. The economy here is not designed for hard landings, because everyone is in their little pods. You know, and those pods are designed by your culture. What language do you speak? What kind of food do you eat? And so if you come here, it's really hard to find that community. So some of the things we're doing to increase that is we're partnering up with organizations that have startup visas. Startup visa programs, for those of you who don't know, is essentially a way of, with the Canadian government, to come to Canada, and within a year you get your PR, but you have to be coming to start a business. If you go directly through the Canadian government, it's 200,000. If you go through one of our startup visa partners, it's only 30,000, and 5 people can come on one. So 30 divided by 5, that's only $5,000 each. There are so many little tricks that I think our community, we don't know. And I'm seeing other communities come, the 5 of them pack. And remember, once you have those 5, you can bring your entire family. So that's 5 families that get their PR within a year or two. They get support with starting a business. They get an incubator, an accelerator community, and then they go back home and they build, and then they trade. I'm seeing this happening in every community except ours, which is why I'm so interested in working with the JTDA to see how we can increase these bridges, increase the access. We've made a lot of different key stakeholder relationships here in Canada, but now how do we leverage it to actually create an impact in the community? And so that's kind of where we are today, increasing that access. And so with the venture fund, we're looking at, okay, let's say these companies come here. Let's say, Godiva applies, she gets her startup visa, she comes to Canada, then what? You need investors. And investors, right now we're seeing the white community, or the predominant community that invests. Last year, it was only 0.13% of VC dollars that went to Black communities. So 666 million sounds like a lot of money, right? But when you look at the 300 billion that 660 million doesn't sound like that much. It's not even 1 billion. So the ways that we're increasing access is through the venture fund, through the startup visa programs, and through these events and accelerator hubs that are really designed to meet people like yourselves. Actually, I met Alexia at Collision last year, speaking on a panel on the DMZ stage, and ever since then I realized that there is something happening in Jamaica too. She was, when I met her, she was like, oh my gosh, all of these different hubs, like she saw it for herself, all these different Black-led hubs. Okay, now how do we reach the Caribbean? And so that would be my focus in increasing access over the next little while.
Thanks for that. I think one of the key things that would have come out is the fact that it's important to empower others and to send the elevator back down. So once you've arrived, or once you would have made some sort of uh, progress, it's important for you to not keep that information to yourself, but seek to empower others so that you can have that sort of networking
Yeah.
effect. But then, how were you able to tap into that? As in, was mentorship and sponsorship part of your journey? And if so, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah.
I'll
Me
start
too.
with you. Yeah,
Godiva?
Godiva.
All right. I'm ready to jump in on that. Wow, that's a heavy question, right? Because I genuinely enjoyed listening to Melissa because again, I started off this conversation by talking about belonging. But even before you belong, even before you have an opportunity to belong, you have to have access. And the truth is, I sit in this chair and I wear another hat. I wear actually two more hats. I also am on the board for Gen Jamaica, which is a global entrepreneurship network. And one of the things that we have found, especially in mapping the Jamaican entrepreneurship ecosystem, is just how much there are locked access points, for want of
Mm.
better words. Yes. And I frame this as an entrepreneur myself who knows what it is like to build a business, who knows what it's like to get funding or not get funding, um, and also be a part of a community that can support that. When it came to mentorship, I'm I'm very grateful for the simple fact that early on enough, early on enough, and I think I go back to like 18 or so, 18, yeah. I grew up in St. Anne, Brownstown to be specific. Um, and at this time, as you can tell, I like to chat. I chat enough. I chat enough. And I'm very passionate about the areas in which I can have impact, and the areas in which I can drive change. And at 18, someone saw, this girl look like she might have sense, let me put her on some sort of platform so that other persons can see what I see. And it was that early sponsorship, in a very real sense, that allowed me at 18, 19 to be sitting on national boards. And I was like, what do I really hear? And I realized in those moments that even if I didn't necessarily have the most amazing points to contribute as an 18, 19-year-old, what I did have the benefit of experiencing was mentorship, even within those spaces where they saw someone who was young, maybe bright, maybe, and very much willing to put in the work to capitalize on the opportunities that are available. And I love to put this back to Steamhouse. The truth of the matter is, when you think about education, when you think about productivity and opportunities, they're not equal. They're, and I'm going to throw this back to the first time I went to the US was through a student competition that, because I was chair, university, like they pay for quite a bit of things, flight, accommodations, the work. And I realized in that moment that Jamaica is so full of talent. And I wanted to extend that not just to not just to Jamaica, but the entire Caribbean is filled with genuinely talented, hardworking people that, by through no fault of their own, have at different instances not had access. And so when we think about, um, Melissa said building bridges, I like to think about breaking silos. Breaking silos means that we go into places that opportunities don't necessarily exist. Um, and quite frankly, those opportunities might not reach you until you're in your 30s or in your 40s. And then, unfortunately, by that time, life gets a little jaded. But all of this to say, key areas that would have really propelled my early journey was a mentor I had when I was 18 who said, "Hey, Godiva, I see that you're doing a lot of work in your community, working with farmers, helping them to basically advocate for little resources that they might have." That propelled me forward. When I started to basically chair the IEEE at the time, I had lecturers from universities across the road that said, "Hey, Godiva, I see that you're willing to put in the work around this. I see another opportunity that could be yours." And I find that everything that I am able to do right now is because somebody will say, "Hey, I would like to put you here because I see that you want to go further." And that's what I try to do now with Steamhouse. Um, and it looks a little differently, I admit, but again, mentorship happens in different ways. For us, a core part of our programs with students have been around customizing and personalizing experiences, so that when you have a child who likes to be on the computer all the time, or is always watching YouTube, or is playing too much Roblox, or probably even watching too much anime, you center those experiences around older peers who can relate to them, that these things that you like to do, they have a bigger place in the world. If you like to do anime, there are careers in animation. You like to play GTA, here is Unreal Engine, here is Unity, here is how you use Blender, here is how you connect the things that you're already doing, so that you don't necessarily get boxed into a silo where you see these things on the internet, but you're not sure how they connect in real life, and you're not sure how you can be a part of it. So I say all of that to say mentorship is core, and I implore anyone who is here, like, you really don't understand the power of seeing something in someone and providing an opportunity for them, because it's easy to ignore the fact. It's easy to say, all right, cool, they should know these things. No, there are a lot of things that people simply don't know. And
Mm,
sit in a room that you can basically call their name and say, this person is a good fit for that, sets that person up for success. And I
definitely.
caution also that sometimes it works out, sometimes it does not. But I strongly believe in approaching things with hope, and not being dismayed, for want of better words, when things don't work out the first time. It's important to believe in people, because again, there are so many things that you can be, there's so many things that you can do, and investing in people is the core of, I think, again, the human experience. Nobody is here to simply build tech for building tech's sake. We do what we do, we work in the ways that we work, so that we can take care of our families, so that we can take care of ourselves, so that we can be as human as possible. So
Hmm.
being able to advocate for others, and advocate for people, not just willy-nilly. Yeah, vouch for persons when you've seen their value to some extent, but
Exactly.
always feel free to pour into others and
Exactly.
full return.
Exactly, exactly. Sponsorship is going to be a very big part of the journey, so that we ensure that more persons that look like we do and that have similar experiences to us are able to have a seat at the table, but also to influence, the different areas of life that are important. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback in the chat. Junior has been saying tech is the great equalizer. He's also said this is a very stimulating conversation, proud of the journey of these amazing ladies, and hope many will draw inspiration from their experiences. Well done. Nicholas was also grateful for the information that was shared regarding the accelerator. So he says, great information on the accelerator and how to increase the chances of success. I have a friend right now in Canada and he has not found that sense of community. Thank you for the information, Melissa. Now, any final thoughts as we wrap this discussion, Melissa, on what is some advice that you would have for aspiring female leaders in STEM who may face doubts or obstacles along their journey?
The doubts and the obstacles are inevitable, girl. They are inevitable. I think one of the key tips I would give is if you don't have co-founders, I would highly encourage you to look for co-founders or some senior advisors. And the reason why I take that approach is when you're building a business, it's literally like raising a child. You need a village. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs go out there. I'm going to be a solopreneur. I'm going to do it on my own. And there are some that will make it. But what you'll notice as they are on their trajectory up, their team starts to grow. And it's a natural reaction because you won't have all the skills. So, some quick tips are see if you can connect with either a senior advisor or grow your team to build your capacity. There's a study that was recently done and it showed that, and this is a stat for North America, but I think it's pretty much across the board. 96% of Black owned businesses do not have at least one employee, not even one. So even if you're just hiring someone part time, you have to duplicate yourself in that person in order to grow. Otherwise, you cannot scale. Do not think that you're going to build your company and be by yourself and just have a couple people help here and there and you'll scale. There's going to be that part where you things will get uncomfortable. You have to trust these people to represent your brand. You have to also train them and deal with their 1,000 questions. But I highly recommend, even if you can't pay them, and listen, I built a team of 30 people and I couldn't afford to pay anybody. But what I did was I understood what their vision was, I understood what their goals were, and I decided to build my company in a way that could work with their vision so that as they're investing sweat equity, they're not just investing into me, but they're investing into themselves. And so some of the key things I try to tell startup founders is money is not going to be the solution to your problem. You need to be able to recruit co-founders without hiring them and paying them. You need to be able to scale your business as well without injecting a bunch of capital, because immediately investors get scared away by that. Because what happens when there's rainy days? You need to be able to be lean enough and be able to bootstrap. So those are some tips I'd give to startup founders. And when building your MVP, don't try to build it all at once. Literally just start with one piece of it that can get you from A to B, even if it's just a newsletter registry that you can now start communicating with these people to test your product. Think about it in a very iterative approach. I could talk all day about that because you can tell this is what I do 24/7. But those are some tips, and I hope they're helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that. Agility, I know, would be very important, especially when you're starting and you're sort of trying to feel your way along. If you're doing something that perhaps no one has ever done before, or you're doing it in a way that's never been done before. And sometimes you need those small wins to kind of uh, to motivate you, to let you know that you're not, everything that you're doing is not in vain. So sometimes, yes, you have a lofty goal, but as you rightly said, to sort of break it up and take an iterative approach, and you kind of look for the low hanging fruit so that you have a sense of accomplishment along the way. And definitely that helps to motivate the team that would be standing behind you, beside you, sometimes in front of you too, to lead the way. Because one of the things that we also see with startups is, while you may have a CEO that may be the head honcho, in many cases, that person is sort of learning at the feet of other persons within that space, within that network. So you're learning from each other and kind of on this journey together, whereby some days the CEO is a driver, another day the admin is the driver, some days you're both, you know. So those things are, of course, very important. Godiva, any words of advice?
All right. Oh, so my advice is going to be centered around. I think I would echo a lot of what Melissa said, because when I was starting out, I needed to hear those things. I needed to hear that it is okay to ask for help. It is okay to ask for help. And it's also okay to know that you don't know everything. So, to some extent, people expect that you're asking for help. Another thing that I would say is, I know fear is a natural part of, you know, being a person. Like, fear comes to you in ways that you didn't even know fear could come. And I implore anyone who's thinking about diving into tech, diving into be a leader in tech, to know that the fear is natural, but it's at that point that it gets very important that as you approach what you have for the vision for your life, and your work, that you get intentional and strategic about communicating that. You know, when you start off something like, it's like you said, it's almost like you have a baby, and but no offense, no offense, it's like you have a baby, but you have an ugly baby, and you don't want to tell anyone about it, or there's something that is wrong with this new creature, and you don't want to put it out there because you're afraid of what people will say. You're afraid of even the thoughts that you will have in your own head. um but I want to again say fear is natural, and being a leader is also to some extent being a creative, because you are creating a version of yourself that has never existed, and that looks scary, that looks ugly, but it is okay to look at the ugly thing, look at the scary thing, and make your baby steps just the same till you get to a place that you're more comfortable. You're not going to be totally comfortable. You may never shed the fears, but what you want to focus on is making incremental steps. And then when a moment of inspiration, or in some states, I don't want to say intimidation, but there are things that force us in life to act in ways that we don't normally act. So whatever it is that drives you in a moment to reach out to somebody who you think you have no business reaching out to, that's normal. Do it anyway. The worst thing they're going to say is no. The very worst thing they're going to say is no. And no's are okay. Failures are okay. It is very much a part of creating something. It's very much a part of stepping into something new. And to women specifically, cliche, 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 we need you. We need your energy, your enthusiasm, and just the way that you look at life. Because diverse perspectives in just about anything ensure that the next time something is built in technology, we're not going to wait 40, 60, or 100 years before your perspective was included. Don't be afraid. Well, be afraid, but don't make a fear stop you.
Exactly. I think that's perfect. Be afraid, but do it anyway. Understanding that fear will definitely be a part of the journey. But you also have to be audacious. A little audacity has to be in there as well. Because, and when you think about it, you have every right to be afraid. If you weren't afraid, then you wouldn't be human. You would have come up with a concept, something that would have just been in the depths of your mind. And you are in the process of bringing this to life. It's okay to be afraid as a female entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur generally, but push through the fear and use that fear so that you are able to achieve your goal ultimately. So I'm going to invite persons to continue dropping their comments. And if they have any questions for Godiva or Melisa, they can drop those in the chat. Just want to remind you as well to follow the JTDA on our social media platforms. So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, so you can definitely find us there. And please come out and join us next week at our Women of Impact celebration that's happening on Thursday at the Courtly Garden Terrace. Let's continue the conversation in person. Let us continue to inspire other women and men as well, because we do need allies. Let us further this conversation, because ultimately it's going to take different perspectives, different, experiences to ensure that we get to where we need to go. An interesting thought is, yes, we're celebrating Women's Month, which would have been an extension of Women's Day. But the interesting thought is, wouldn't it be great if we got to a point where we didn't need to have a Women's Month? Because the rights of women and the perspectives of women were mainstreamed to the point where we wouldn't need to confine it to 30 days to have these sorts of conversations. It would already be the norm that women are at the table. You sit at a table and you see 10 persons, and 5 of them are men and 5 are women, and it's the norm. You don't think it's an anomaly. You don't need to take a photo of it, because this is how things are. And obviously we may be a little way off, but that's where we're heading to. And in order for us to get there, it's going to take a variety of perspectives. I love the fact that both of you would have had various experiences in technology, because it means too, or it drives the fact home, that you don't have to be a programmer to have a space within this world. There are so many different aspects of what it takes to make a contribution to information and communication technology, and even wider within STEM. And all of these perspectives are needed. And so it is critical that if you have an interest, you have an inkling, you're probably not certain about where you fit in, but you kind of want to explore it. Don't be afraid to, because there may very well be a place for you. And I think one of the critical things too is continuous learning. So it's great to have the bachelor's, it's great to have the master's, and even the PhD. But a lot of persons that have those qualifications will tell you that what they were taught 12 years ago, there's so much that has happened since then, that there are many aspects of that degree that are now not necessarily obsolete, but there's so much more that's happening within the space that continuous learning must be a part of it. So I think as an entrepreneur, especially if you're trying to get into that tech space, being on social media, yes, it's great to be on TikTok and looking at the dances and stuff and, trying to catch them and all of these things. But it's also good to, follow persons who are within that space that you're trying to be a part of, looking for the types of books that can help you to learn more about the space, learn about the innovations happening within the space, so that you are able to, better able to play your role. And so I just really want to thank you, ladies, for being here with us this evening. The session has been informative, it's been insightful, enlightening, inspiring. I know that there are many persons that their eyes would have been opened to different perspectives. And definitely, I know that persons would have left here inspired to continue on their path, or perhaps to chart a new course. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Definitely, you are women to watch, women leading innovation. We thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. And definitely, we are excited about what's to come for each of you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.